Picture someone stronger than you, smarter in ways you can't measure. Someone who could read your face before you said a word, who could survive a winter that would kill you in 3 days. Now picture that person gone. Not defeated, not destroyed in some great battle, just gone. That's what happened to the Neanderthals. And the strangest part isn't that they disappeared, it's why. For decades, the story was simple. Neanderthals were the dumb cousins. Heavy brows, hunched backs, grunting in caves, while clever modern humans marched across the world building civilization. That story is wrong. Almost every piece of it. And the real version is so unsettling that some scientists still argue about whether to say it out loud. Start with the body. A Neanderthal's bones tell you everything. Thick, dense, built like a powerlifter who never stopped training. Their forearms alone could likely outgrip a modern boxer. Researchers studying Neanderthal skeletons found bone density and muscle attachment points consistent with extreme physical labor from childhood. Not occasional labor. Constant. Every day for an entire lifetime, just to survive in an Ice Age landscape. Their brains were not smaller than ours. In fact, on average, they were slightly larger. That number alone breaks the old narrative. Bigger brain, stronger body built for a colder, harsher world than the one modern humans evolved in. So why does smarter still sound surprising when you say it about a Neanderthal? Part of it is the face. We're wired to read faces fast, and a heavy brow ridge reads to modern eyes as something closer to an ape than a person. But a brow ridge isn't a measure of thought. It's a structural feature, likely reinforcing the skull against the forces of a powerful jaw and an active life. You could put a sharp suit on a Neanderthal skeleton and a museum visitor would still flinch. That flinch isn't science. It's a few hundred years of cartoons and textbook illustrations doing the talking, because for a long time intelligence was measured by one thing: stuff, tools, artifacts. Things that survive in the dirt for 50,000 years. Neanderthals left behind fewer of those things. So the assumption became, fewer things means less mind. But that assumption was built on a flawed test. Imagine judging your intelligence by how many objects you left in a landfill. Some of the smartest decisions a person makes leave no trace at all. Here's what Neanderthals actually did. They made glue, real engineered adhesive, by heating birch bark in a low-oxygen environment to extract tar, a multi-step chemical process that requires planning, patience, and an understanding of cause and effect. Across time, they used that glue to attach stone points to wooden shafts, creating composite tools. Composite tools are a cognitive leap. They mean you're not just using an object, you're combining materials with different properties to create something neither material could do alone. They controlled fire with precision. Most modern campers couldn't match. Archaeological sites show repeated, sustained hearths in the same locations across generations, not accidents, but maintained spaces. Some sites show evidence of structured living areas, one zone for sleeping, another for tool making, another for processing food. That's not a campsite. That's an organized home, used the same way, year after year. There's also clothing to consider. Neanderthals lived through some of the harshest cold in human prehistory, and bare skin doesn't survive that. Evidence of hide-working tools suggests they were processing animal skins, likely into tailored coverings rather than simple wraps. You don't survive an Ice Age winter in a blanket. You survive it in something closer to a fitted garment, and making one of those requires measuring, cutting, and planning around a body that isn't your own. They cared for their injured. Skeletons have been found with healed fractures so severe that the individual could not have survived without months of help from others. Someone bringing food, someone keeping them warm, someone choosing again and again to keep a person alive who could give nothing back in return. Think about that for a second. An animal driven purely by survival instinct does not carry the weight of another animal that can no longer hunt. But Neanderthals did, over and over, across different sites across thousands of years. That's not an accident of biology. That's a choice, a social structure, a value system. And it wasn't just the badly injured. Some skeletons show signs of old age. Individuals who had lost most of their teeth, who would have struggled to chew tough meat without help. Someone was softening their food. Someone was making space for them at the fire long after they stopped being useful in the hunt. In a world this harsh, that kind of care isn't a luxury. It's a deliberate decision repeated by an entire community to value a person beyond their output. And then there's the part that makes people uncomfortable. The empathy. There's a particular kind of evidence that shows up at Neanderthal sites, and it's not tools or fire or food, it's flowers. Pollen analysis at one famous burial site suggested a body had been placed in the ground, surrounded by flowering plants. The interpretation has been debated for decades. Some researchers think it's evidence of ritual, others think it might be coincidence, pollen carried in by burrowing animals. But here's the thing, The debate itself is the point. We are arguing about whether Neanderthals grieved with flowers, not whether they grieved. The grieving, the deliberate burial, the careful placement of bodies, that part isn't really in question anymore. So picture the full version now. A species stronger than us, with brains as large or larger, capable of complex engineering, sustained cooperation, and care for the sick and dying, living successfully in Europe and Asia for over 300,000 years, more than 10 times longer than all of recorded human history. And then in the span of a few thousand years, they were gone. What happened? For a long time, the easy answer was war. Modern humans arrived, modern humans won, simple as that. But the genetic evidence tells a stranger story. If you have European or Asian ancestry, there's a good chance somewhere between 1 and 4% of your DNA came directly from Neanderthals. That's not the genetic signature of a species that was wiped out in conflict. That's the signature of two populations that lived close enough, long enough to have children together. So maybe it wasn't a war. Maybe it was something slower, something almost invisible. One theory points to numbers, not strength, not intelligence, just population size. Genetic studies suggest Neanderthal populations were small and scattered, likely numbering in the tens of thousands across their entire range, spread thin across a continent. Modern humans arriving from Africa may have come in larger, more interconnected groups. Larger populations share ideas faster. They have more chances for a useful innovation to spread, more backup if a local group is wiped out by disease or famine. Being strong as an individual doesn't help if your entire population is too small to absorb a bad decade. Think about what a small scattered population actually means day to day. Fewer neighboring groups to trade ideas with, fewer chances to meet someone who learned a slightly better way to haft a spear, or treat a wound, or store food through a bad season. Innovation doesn't just come from individual brilliance, it comes from contact, from one group's lucky discovery spreading to the next group, and the next. A species can be brilliant and still be isolated, and an isolated brilliance generation after generation eventually starts to look a lot like standing still while everyone else moves. Another theory points to climate. The Ice Age wasn't a steady cold. It was a series of brutal swings, rapid warming, and cooling events that reshaped entire ecosystems within a human lifetime. Neanderthals were exquisitely adapted to a specific kind of cold, harsh, resource-dense environment. When that environment shifted fast again and again, the very specialization that made them so formidable in one world may have made them fragile in the next. Modern humans, less specialized, more behaviorally flexible, may have simply been better at adapting to a world that wouldn't stop changing. Specialization is a strange kind of trap. The better you get at thriving in one specific set of conditions, the more those conditions become invisible to you. They're just normal. You stop building the muscles, habits, and tools you'd need for a different world because you've never needed them. Then the world shifts, and the very excellence that made you dominant yesterday becomes the thing holding you in place today. And then there's the theory that's hardest to sit with. Disease. When two populations that have been separated for hundreds of thousands of years suddenly come into close, repeated contact, they exchange more than tools and stories. They exchange pathogens. A pathogen that's mild in one population can be devastating in another that's never encountered it before. We've seen this play out in human history before on a much faster timescale, with consequences that reshaped entire continents. It's possible something similar, slower, quieter, but just as final, played out between Neanderthals and modern humans. There's also a theory that doesn't get talked about as much because it's the least dramatic, simple absorption. If small Neanderthal groups kept meeting slightly larger groups of modern humans, generation after generation, and kept having children with them, you don't need a single dramatic ending at all. You just need the Neanderthal-only lineages to slowly stop being Neanderthal-only. Not a death, a dilution. Over enough generations, a distinct population can simply stop being distinct, not because it lost, but because it blended until the label no longer applied. The truth is probably not one of these. It's probably all of them, layered together. A population already small, a climate already unstable. A new neighbor arriving with new diseases and slightly different tools. None of those things alone would have ended 300,000 years of survival. Together, they might have been enough. Here's the part that should stay with you. Neanderthals weren't defeated because they were weak, or simple, or unfeeling. By almost every measure we can dig up, they were strong, intelligent, and capable of deep social bonds, capable of caring for each other in ways that look almost familiar. They didn't lose because they were less than us. They may have lost because the world changed faster than even a perfectly adapted species could keep up, and because, in the long run, being numerous and flexible mattered more than being strong and specialized. Now think about your own life. Think about the systems you've built, your habits, your routines, the way you've optimized your days around the world as it currently is. highly adapted, highly efficient, built for the conditions. The Neanderthals were perfectly adapted too, right up until the conditions changed. And the world you've optimized for, it's changing faster than theirs ever did.